Welcome, everybody, to another episode of our summer intern series here with the National Reentry Network for Returning Citizens. I am your host again, Zachary Ragone, our policy director, and I'm here with our interns this summer.
Hi, I'm Cassidy.
Hi, I'm David.
Hi, I'm Maryam.
And so the last episode, we kind of gave an introduction to our interns, talked a little bit about what brought them to the organization. And today we're going to shift up a little bit and talk about a experience they had recently as we visited the DC jail, and also just talking about incarceration in general. So I think this is going to be a very interesting discussion, and so let's jump right in. We'll start with Cassidy. What was a particular thing that really stuck with you, a moment that stuck with you while visiting the DC jail?
I think the biggest thing that kind of stuck with me throughout that visit was the fire alarm. Every few minutes, I think it was every 10, 15 minutes, the fire alarm would start going off throughout the entire jail, and it was blaring. Like, it literally made me feel like my ears were going to bleed. It was just echoing throughout the halls. It was so unbelievably loud. And when talking to the people within the jail, they were talking about how this is a pretty regular thing. Like, about once a month, the fire alarms will start to go off, and it'll be all day long until it just randomly stops. And I just was so shocked by the fact that they've been having to deal with this for years at this point, where it's just constantly happening once a month like clockwork. And it's something that no one should have to experience, because just in the 45 minutes to an hour that we were visiting the jail, I had such a bad headache by the end of it. Like, it was an enjoyable visit, don't get me wrong, but the fact that they had to experience that so regularly really stuck with me, and it was quite shocking.
No, that makes sense, and I know a number of you had mentioned during that visit and after about that fire alarm and the impact and reality that kind of set in hearing it. So would either of the two of you want to speak about that as well? Because I know that was something that really was on people's attention.
No, I'd say it was even more than 10 to 15 minutes, because even we were there for an hour and heard it at least 10 times, felt like. And I think a bigger part to the frequency of it was their reactions to it. There was some that couldn't bear it, but then there was others where it was just normal. It was just some normal thing that was gonna happen, and it came on, everybody went silent. And I think it's kind of inhumane to think about, and the alarm's already loud enough so that people can hear it inside of their rooms and stuff. So you can only imagine how loud it was in the common area where we were sitting with them. But yeah, I think it was and then also the other side. So what I was thinking was how the staff also was they thought it was they were just going about their job, just walking around nothing was happening. And I think it's scary to think if there actually was a fire, and let's say the fire alarm stopped for a month and then it starts back, and it actually is a fire this time, nobody's going to move with urgency.
Yeah, that is one of the things that's always interesting when you go back in, or when you go in for the first time. It's seeing how things that can be very abnormal to the general individual from the street becomes normal and becomes kind of run-of-the-mill for those that have gone in, because you have to just kind of adapt to the abnormal to be able to survive through there.
Yeah, I think everything that they said was exactly what I was thinking. But the thing that stood out to me the most was it wasn't a regular fire alarm. That was the most hellacious fire alarm I've ever heard. It wasn't your classic supermarket or school fire alarm, which is meh, meh. It was I don't even know. It felt like a war zone alarm. I was what is going on? What is that alarm? Did someone escape? I didn't know what was going on. And they're oh, no, that's the fire alarm. And I was the fire alarm? What? And then, yeah, it was so loud I had to cover my ears every single time. I had to put my, fingers in my ears so I couldn't hear it, because it was actually nothing I've ever experienced.
Absolutely.
And I think, the bigger reason, what angers me the most about it as well is that there is, hundreds of millions of dollars being put into all this, beautification and cosmetic stuff in and around, D.C. and the Capitol. And then there's still, issues like this going on. And it's, where does it just shows where the priorities of our country is today, and how unfortunate that is that they have money to put on events and change how something looks for just cosmetics, but not to actually help and better like how people are living like when they're incarcerated.
So that's actually a wonderful point and something interesting as it relates to the jail, and especially with three people who aren't from DC that just kind of experienced it the first time. If you had to take a guess, about how old do you think that facility likely is?
I'd say probably like 50 years. Maybe even like you could just
Ding.
tell by the way like the seats we were sitting in, the seats they were, it just looked like it was something from like a long time ago and they just wanted something easy to clean.
Well, I was going to give you the ding, ding, ding. That is exactly what it is. It's a 50-year-old facility. We're getting some nice little golf claps coming from the side there. Yeah, it's been a problem in the city for quite some time. There's largely been instances of people talking about needing to repair it, replace it. It's gone through multiple instances where they've actually had their ability to hold federal inmates removed because of the conditions inside it. But unfortunately enough, while there's been talk of getting a replacement facility, there's not been a lot of real forward momentum in doing it. And so you have this very aging facility that's still going on.
Like even at that, like maybe it's not undergoing a full like renovation, but like at least allocating some funding to fix the fire alarm that's been going off for how long now? Like that's insane. Like
No, absolutely. So along those same lines, I know when before we went in, there was a lot of talk about kind of what you were expecting, what you thought you might end up seeing. How did those expectations or what you thought of going into it possibly change or were confirmed when you walked in?
I know people who have been, I'm from Miami, and I know people who have been to the Miami jail, and it's a lot, I would say, more intimidating. So I was like a little scared when we went because I initially thought that we were going to be going to some sort of like side room, and then like people were going to be brought in, and then we would all like maybe sit down together, like I don't even know, like on opposite sides of the table. Like I don't really know what I was expecting. But then when we like were going through, and then you know you like hear the door open, and then you're in that like midpoint, and then that door has to do the whole like 60 days in like and then it like shuts closed, and then the other one has to open, but that one has to be closed. It was like getting super real, and then before I knew it, we were literally like inside of their living quarters, and I was like, oh wow, like I didn't know that this is what we were doing. And so I was kind of like intimidated, like in that moment. Like I was kind of like, oh, like what are we doing here? Because I know people who have been to like the Miami jail, and it's just like as like a young woman, like it is a bit you know, like there are some boundaries that definitely get crossed, like at least from what I've heard, like from people I know that have been to the Miami jail, you know, men like making comments, like trying to grab you, like, you know, just saying things that like really make women uncomfortable. And so I was kind of scared, but it was like, it was nothing like that. Like it was literally nothing like that. I know we were in like the substance unit, so I don't know if that had something to do with it, but we literally just sat down with them and then like had a conversation, and then at the end like we all like went up to them and talked and like shook hands, and like it was a very humanizing experience, and it was more than I could have imagined. Like it was a really neat experience, and also it was nothing like what I thought it was going to be like, which is good because I was a little scared.
All right, David?
I'd say like the question was like how my initial
Yeah, your expectations going in, and did what you end up seeing or experiencing kind of meet those, or was it different than what you were expecting?
Yeah, I'd say it was like almost what I expected, like from past like experiences I've had. I think the like being in the substance unit probably like helped with our experience, but I think they were very like they were just normal people like you'd meet in the grocery store. It wasn't like any like I didn't feel intimidated. I like didn't feel like I don't know. I think it reaffirmed that whole aspect of like not everybody in there is bad, like cuz that's one thing like I've always heard, but like I feel like sometimes it's hard to like actually like believe it when like you see certain things or you hear like certain things, but I think like that was like a real picture and like experience of like that people do deserve a second chance. And I really like how they were like active listening and like asking questions, really like wanting to be engaged with like our resources here at the National Reentry Network, and I think that shows like how they've grown while being like incarcerated as well. Yeah.
Excellent.
Well, my mom was a probation officer when I was young, so I had visited a jail in Colorado, but it wasn't anything like this experience. Just I went through the metal detector, and then we went towards like more of like the office corridors. We didn't actually interact with anyone in the jail. So going into it, I kind of didn't really know what to expect. I was just kind of picturing everything you see on TV, where it's like the traditional prison cell with like the bars and, like Maryam said, people like reaching for you and being loud, and like I just kind of pictured that it would be very overwhelming. But when we got in there, and I think like they were saying it might have been because of the unit we were in, but like when we sat down, it just kind of felt like we were having like almost a public forum where like a few of us were just kind of sitting in the front, overviewing our organization, and then just having a real human conversation with these people. And I just think it was a really positive experience, just simply because it allowed us to really connect with people and humanize them in a very meaningful way. And it really did kind of break down those initial like stereotypes that I kind of had in thinking about like what a jail would look like on the inside. Like it was very much so like low key, aside from the fire alarm going off every few minutes. But aside from that, it was a great experience. Like everyone, like Maryam was saying, was very down to earth, very kind, just very interested in learning what we had to share with them.
So you bring up a good point in terms of the all of you kind of brought this up in that your interactions with the people inside was a little bit outside of what you were expecting, or you weren't sure what you were expecting, but it was kind of a better interaction than you necessarily were going into thinking. And so I wonder, is this the type of thing that you would recommend for individuals in the public to volunteer to do if they have a chance to be able to go inside a prison or into a jail and actually interact with some of the people? Do you think that is something that would potentially move public opinion or stigma as it relates to this population?
I think it kind of depends on the type of person, because and also like what you're wanting to bring to the table when you go. Like if you come in and you're just going to try to force your own way of life onto these people, I think that wouldn't be helpful. I think you need to go into it with a very open mind and just with the perspective that I'm here to learn just as much as they are, and I'm here to interact and spread the knowledge that they desire in this case. And so like for us, we are a reentry organization, so we were trying to share our services, but there's other things that can be very beneficial to these communities. I think it definitely just kind of depends on what you're bringing to the table.
I mean, yeah, I definitely agree with Cassidy. I think that if someone like were willing to do that, they would definitely have to go inside and like have like their orientation to it can't be like, oh, I'm gonna go and try and like educate them and talk to me about their past and like all that stuff. Like that's definitely not the right way to go about it. I definitely wonder the difference it would be as like just an individual going to spend time in there versus like an organization like ours who they've already kind of been exposed to prior, and they also know that like we're going in there to try and help them. So I wonder if like they would, like the people inside the facilities and outside the facilities would like act differently or like care for it or things like that, because I know like again like, I know this is like so stupid, I keep saying the same thing, but like when the person I know went to like the Miami jail, like it was definitely like not as like low key.
Yeah. And it definitely it can be one of those things depending on the types of floors you're going on, custody levels. But I will say overall, my experience both through volunteering myself and while inside, anybody on the outside that's willing to volunteer their time, come in and provide some level of services, whether that is, I've seen that with people coming in, giving their time for religious purposes. I've seen people coming in, giving their time for rehabilitative or just self-betterment things, whether that is meditation classes or things along that line, and people coming in offering opportunities such as reentry. It's typically viewed very favorably because that gives those inside that chance to see that there are people on the outside that do still care, that see them as people, not as others. And usually that will lead them to approach it from a welcoming and open kind of stance on things. And so, yeah.
So like if someone were to come in and provide like a service that is beneficiary to them, like, so you're saying?
Yeah, it's one of those things to where I think ultimately, no matter how you might choose to volunteer, I think if you are able to volunteer inside a jail or prison and go in and provide some sort of outreach, support, service, that a lot of times you do get very well received, and it gives you that chance to really see the humanity of the people inside. I know for myself, one of the largest things that really had an impact with me was the first Christmas while inside, and this large organization managed to get all kinds of volunteers to come in and provide food for a large amount of the people that had signed up for as a Christian, and were able to do like a Christmas dinner with a bunch of people and all these volunteers there, and just seeing so many people from the community that didn't know necessarily anybody on that block to come in and give their time was really meaningful.
Yeah, that's great.
So to transition a little bit away from that specific experience, but talking more broadly about incarceration, what do you all see as the purpose of the criminal legal system, and specifically of the incarceration aspect of it? How about we start with David?
Um, I'd say like the purpose of like incarceration definitely like it varies on like who you're talking to. And like I think that's why like sometimes funding like maybe cut, or like why sometimes it's like they're putting incarceration in the hands of like private organizations to run it. But I think like rehabilitation's like one reason of why, but then also there's the other side of like wanting to keep like other people safe who aren't like committing crimes. And I think sometimes it's more just about like keeping other people safe than it is about like truly helping like the people who are making these mistakes and ending up in these correctional facilities.
So from a policy perspective, since that's kind of the lens that I often come through things, when it relates to the legal system and incarceration, there's a lot of different goals that are claimed. Sometimes it might be for the purpose of punishment. Sometimes it might be for deterrence, or as you were talking about, David, incapacitation, that ability to take someone away from a situation where they might be able to commit further offenses. And then rehabilitation or accountability are all other reasons that is stated. But what I'd like to know from you all, just from your outside view of it, what do you think our current system in the United States kind of focuses most on in terms of the goals of incarceration? And what do you think ultimately the proper balance likely is?
I think in the U.S., like, the biggest focus when it comes to incarceration is punishment. Whether it be just getting someone who committed a very violent crime off the street and trying to make them like kind of feel remorseful, or at least be able to reflect on their actions and know that their actions have consequences. And I think another part of it is also trying to, I guess, protect the other people in the community that could potentially be harmed by those who have committed crimes. But I don't think this is the way the prison system should be structured. I feel like it needs to be structured in a way that is rehabilitation focused, because eventually, depending on the sentence, of course, these people will re-enter society, and the best way to set them up for success and make sure they don't reoffend is to make sure they are set up with the tools to help them successfully acclimate back into society, like our organization tries to do. So if you structure it in that way while they're actually in the facility, instead of just waiting for them to get out and try to find it on their own, it'll make it so they're a bit more set up to actually be able to participate in society and hopefully not want to reoffend once they're released. Because I think one of the biggest reasons for long-term offenders to repeat an offense is because they don't really know how to function in the outside world. And so some people just want to go back because they know, I know how to live within the system. I can somehow find a way to survive, but I don't know how to do it in the outside world anymore. So if we structure the system in a way that is rehabilitation focused, I think we would be a lot better off.
And I think to add on to just like not even the success of like the individuals like when they're returning back to society, but just also like the growth of our communities. I think like part of the reason like communities like for example, one of my papers I'm writing for the Black Table Talk is talking about Anacostia, I think is how you say it. And it's a low income area, but a lot of returning citizens reside there. And I think part of the problem in terms of like obviously like just because an area is low income doesn't mean crime rates and like that's not a correlation, but the part of that is because it like the returning citizens weren't set up properly to acclimate back to society and like be good like responsible citizens.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything they said. I feel like they checked all of the boxes. Yeah, I mean, I really, like, I know that the whole, like, rehabilitation argument has been introduced, like, into, because you see all these, like, Eastern European countries, like, trying to, like, put that kind of system in place, and, like, it's working there. And I think, I don't want to butcher it, but there is one country in Eastern Europe that I think, like, officially closed its last prison. And, like, it's, like, completely been, you know, like, turned into, like, rehabilitation efforts. And I understand that I feel like the main argument that I hear around that is that it would cost, like, a lot of money. I feel like that's why people are, like, mostly opposed to it, to my understanding, like, from what I've read. But, like, I feel like the return on investment is, like, so much grander than what we would spend. Also, if you think about how much we already spend, like, within our legal system and our prison system, like, you know, like, even if we take minimal efforts to get there, like, and we do it in steps, like, gradually, like, once we get to a full, like, rehabilitation facility, like, it's been proven to work. And on both sides of the argument, like whether you have like a more liberal take on it or a more conservative take on it, I feel like both meet in the middle in terms of like wanting what's best for the community, and whether that's like for the community that have been, I guess, like that this individual is returning back to, or to like the community as a whole. Like they both just want what's best for the community, and like if that has been proven to be successful and like punishment hasn't, then I don't really understand why we're not just, let's just go do that.
Yeah. So do you believe there is a place for punishment in the equation of the legal system, or do you think punishment in and of itself is not an end that should be sought through this?
I think punishment is like part of what like helps with rehabilitation, but I think it shouldn't be like the primary focus of the system itself. I think I'm thinking back to like the way I was raised by my parents. Like, yeah, you get punished, but like they tell you like what to do better next time, like why you were wrong. And I think there's always like there's been a learning experience through like
you're not just sent to your room and not told why or not told what to do to
yes,
improve it. Okay.
My phone didn't just get taken away just because like I think there was like you had to sit down and have a conversation like with had a conversation with like my parents, but I think a similar like focus should be had like in the prison system. Like punishment shouldn't be the goal of what we're trying to do with like in terms of like rehabilitation.
Yeah, I tend to agree with what David is saying. I think it's like a bit of like a loaded question that I feel like I would have to do more research to like fully kind of
those are the best kind of questions.
On. Yeah, totally. But I think it does go back to like your roots in like elementary, where you learn like actions have consequences, but like you learn why those actions have consequences, and then you tend not to do it again once you face that consequence and understand how that impacted others, how that impacted yourself, your community, your development, things like that.
And I think another part to like action, like being able to sit down and talk with someone. I think like mental health is like a big thing right now too, and it's like yeah, you're punishing someone because they did like this heinous crime, but like they're like mentally it might be something wrong, and like you'll never get to the bottom of that. You just throw them into a prison cell,
Right.
and like they end up in solitary confinement, and it's like
And then you reoffend.
yeah.
It's a cycle.
And I think one of the things you guys keep hitting on is the notion of what comes next from the punishment, and from that list of things that typically from a criminal justice perspective and political science perspective, that is the point of incarceration, is yes, punishment might be there, but it's that notion of accountability and that notion of incapacitation. And so much of our current system is just focused on, we're going to send you to jail or send you to prison to punish you and to incapacitate you, whereas you all are talking about a kind of a notion of the punishment should lead to a sense of accountability to the community, accountability for what happened, and then the rehabilitation part is that notion of how to move forward in a better fashion to be successful going forward, and to kind of turn away from that. But it seemed like both of you were kind of acknowledging that to a certain level, punishment is part of the process. So the question then becomes, is it possible to have some element of punishment but still do it right with a way that respects human dignity?
I think you would have to walk a very fine line in order to achieve that, because the types of punishments that we currently have within our system are inherently degrading and dehumanizing. And like Maryam and David were saying, knowing that your actions have consequences and being able to take accountability for the actions you've taken is so important. And being able to show someone that their actions are not just is very important, but it's very hard to be able to walk that line and be able to accurately discipline them and show them how to change their actions without being like degrading or dehumanizing them, or just like subjecting them to something that no one should have to experience.
Such as an extremely loud decibel fire alarm going off
Yeah, and
over and over and over
really
again.
like the primary punishment they're facing. That's just secondary. That's just their living conditions.
Yep. And that leads to another kind of good question. It's one of those things where, when people think of punishment as it relates to incarceration, like what's generally what are you viewing? What are you imagining as what the punishment part is supposed to be?
I mean, I think when I envision, like, my definition of punishment in our system is kind of the whole thing. It's really like, well, I think it's important to talk about like why people like offend in the first place, and whether it's because of something that they like did like alone, or if it was something that they were kind of like socially conditioned to do, like based off of like their environment and their circumstances. So I think that would totally play a role in like the rehabilitation process, because sometimes it has to be, like it has to be like pre-rehabilitation. Like you kind of have to rehabilitate something that hasn't happened yet. Like you see it in like lower income communities and how the crime may not necessarily correlate, but, like studies and research have shown that like a lot of times they're put in situations that make it easier to offend than like, let's say like someone else who has like access to like more education or, more income, more opportunity, things like that. And then,
and we're going to have Maryam just teed us up for a perfect tease for a future episode where we'll be actually talking about the notion of public health and how that impacts interaction with the criminal justice system, our criminal legal system. So great tee up there.
Yeah, so I think that's important, but I think when I think of punishment, I really do think it's like the whole thing, like initially being removed like from like society and community as you know it, and everything like that entails within itself, like your home, your family, your friends, your belongings, like your any like sense of communication, like all of that I think is an emotional punishment. and then like you physically get into the facilities, and then like more physical punishments start to coming, like you dehumanize them by everybody wearing the same color, by sleeping on metal beds with low support, literally living in like a 5x5 box with bars on as your door, like an animal. Like it just starts there, and that's emotional and physical. And then my article for Black Table Talk talks about the nutrition insecurity individuals face within the facilities, and that's like a punishment within itself, because studies have shown that when people like end up leaving the facilities, they come out with like such severe like diseases and illnesses that have like been further developed from like nutrition insecurities and like just like lack of access to proper food and proper nutrition. So that's like a form of punishment within itself, like needing money to go to commissary, like all of these things they're all punishment. The whole thing is punishment.
Yep. And I think that's the huge thing, and I'm glad you really pointed that out, because a lot of times the general public, when they think of someone violating the law and going to prison, that just the process of going to prison is the punishment. And yet the level of food, the level of the maintenance of the facility, as we talked about with the fire alarm, the level of access to the outside world, not to mention the potential impacts to their, as you mentioned, home, their possessions, their family connections, all add to that punishment. And yet we don't typically think of that when the judge, you go before the judge and he gives you the punishment. It's just a time, it's just a length. But there's so much more to what the actual punishment is.
And then it doesn't end there. Like when you get out, and now like depending on where you live, like certain rights, you've been stripped of certain rights. You like that amendment that we were talking about the housing. What is it called?
The Thurmond Amendment.
The Thurmond Amendment, where you don't have access to government housing if you have like a certain drug charge, like things like that. And like oftentimes, like you get out and you get put in touch with reentry organizations, and I found like through our helpline that maybe a lot of them have either like lost funding or things like that, so they're not answering the phones because they're doing other things, or they just can't provide adequate help because they don't have proper resources themselves. And so it's a really, this internship has been like so eye-opening to like the whole processes, and like the punishment really doesn't stop the second you're released, which is like kind of what I thought before, where it's like, oh, once you get released, like you're released, like go back out, like get a job. Like I obviously knew it wasn't that easy to go and get a job, but I didn't think it was gonna be like, I don't know, it just, this internship has opened like a lot of information to me that I didn't know prior.
Another thing is like when you're in the facility, you're working these like different jobs within the system where you're like helping out with laundry, you're helping out with food service, like they're making you like help out with these different tasks, but you're getting paid little to nothing. So even if you wanted to get something from the commissary, it'll take you a while to save up for it. And like for women, that's where you can get your feminine hygiene products, which should be a basic necessity, but you have to pay for it at the commissary. But you're doing these jobs that pay you nothing. And then once you get out of the system, like Maryam was talking about, it is so unbelievably difficult to find a job once you have a record, because it kind of brands you for life. Even if it's a minor offense, no matter what it is, just seeing that you have a record, employers will immediately look at that and kind of, it'll give them pause. Like even if you're the most open employer, it kind of makes you wonder what type of person this is, and that's not how it should be.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So let's we're going to begin to wrap up here, and I guess I'd like to go around and just say, what is one thing from your experience interacting inside the DC jail that you would like the public to know, or wish that they would know about it? And we'll start with David.
I wish like the public, like we were already talking about like having people volunteer, but I think like just the atmosphere, like being there, it's like something that even the words we're like saying today, like it truly doesn't tell the story of like what it's like to be in a correctional facility. And I think it shows to the efforts of those, like, our organization and, like, what we're fighting for and, like, the change we're fighting for, because it's hard to truly, like, get behind the change if you've never seen it. And I think this has definitely made me, like, myself more, like, passionate about, like, criminal justice reform and, like, wanting to help those within and, like, the people, like, returning citizens after they're released. And I think it's yeah, just truly, like, the impact of, like, being able to visit a jail.
Excellent. Cassidy?
My biggest takeaway that I want people to kind of learn from this is those are people on the inside. Just like you and me, they might have made a mistake that landed them there, but at the end of the day, we're all people. And having some of those conversations, I met so many kind people that were just very interested in learning about our program and learning about kind of like what's going on in DC right now, like what are some of the things we all enjoy. And they were just searching for humanity and a type of connection with those on the outside world. And so recognizing those are people, no matter what kind of offense that they did that ended up leading to where they are, they still need love and care and nurturing and support from the outside world just as much as we do out here.
Maryam?
I really like what both of you guys said. I think like the humanizing aspect of it. I really resonate with what David said, where I feel like we're saying like, oh yeah, they were so nice, like everything was so low key, like more like physical things about the environment, like the fire alarm. But there is like it's really like you can't put it into words. Like I feel like we're making it sound kind of happy-go-lucky, like it's kind of chill in there, and like there is a vibe, and like it is sad, and like it's really moving. And I think if people did like go and experience that and understand, I think they would have a lot more sympathy or empathy like for those people in there who are like living there. And one thing that I would love the world to know is that there are individuals in there who like have a book club and like want to like expand it and like appreciate, like I feel like there's this notion that like they are uneducated and they don't want to learn, and they wasted their time and they made a mistake and they harm society, so that's why they're in there. But like it couldn't be less true. Like they do want to learn, and like they're proving that in there. And they had like, we have a book club with our organization, and there was one individual who was like so excited about possibly like connecting it and like bringing the book club in there, and I just thought that was great.
No, absolutely. I would guarantee, I would absolutely guarantee on a bet that if you grabbed 10 random people off the street and 10 random people in jail and saw which one of them had read more books in the past 3 months, that those incarcerated are definitely going to be the ones coming out on top. Reading is one of those things that really goes heavy inside. So thank you all for your insight and your thoughts. They were absolutely fantastic throughout this whole podcast and through the whole series that we're going to be doing. Speaking of, next week we're going to be talking a little bit more from a policy perspective and as it relates to advocacy within the actual local legal systems or the local political system. So that's going to be a great one to stand by and watch next week. And until then, thank you all for listening, and we look forward to shining a spotlight on our interns again next week.